Okay. So, our next topic, this is probably the topic that gets me most jazzed up. And I love talking about this, working through some of our scenarios, some of our experience, some of the things we've done as a firm and I've done through my career. And I've given this presentation only once before I put it together for our church. It was back in 2013. And, I think it's, part of the reason why I get so jazzed up, I'm so excited about this. It's really, it's God's work, and it's part of my testimony as well, which a pretty exceptional story. I lost my father to cancer, and it was like 12 years ago when I lost him. And at that time, I was, when I went through that process of, he got cancer, I was not living a real godly lifestyle. I was a believer, but I was kind of backslid a little bit, wasn't living a great lifestyle, and I took off about 3 months as like a sabbatical, and I just took care of him at the OSU James Hospital. And that time period was very special because I became very close to God, and through that process recommitted my life to Him. And when I did that, it was just, it's so I can smile, even though I lost my dad, I can smile because the outcome was life-changing for me. And it was a tragedy into triumph story. So, but what happened was, professionally, I was doing well. I had all the credentialing. I was, partner material or vice president material, all these big firms. But when I got out, it was amazing what God had done. I mean, I took 3 months off. It was right before I got married. I didn't get income. I didn't get anything. I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And after my father passed away, a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, there's a client of ours that's selling their business. And he goes, I think that you'd be a great candidate to help them out. And I'm like, okay, and I didn't even think, I'm just thinking, okay, this is going to be a new client and I need to get some new clients. I've been out of work for some time. And my business did not take off at that point. But so he introduced me to this family, and he knew my faith, and I had shared it with him over breakfast that morning, and how my life has really turned around. And he introduced me to this family, and this family sold their business for not $1 million or $2 million, but $100 million. So it was I got thrown right into this, and they interview people, and they were interviewing the biggest of big firms. I was going to bat against Goldman Sachs and all these teams of people, and then I just walked in and really made my company mad because I didn't want any help. I just wanted to do it on my own, and I won it on my own, just myself. I won the business. But a big part of that story is they're a Christian family, dynamic Christian family, and they gave away like 80% of it. Okay, so they gave away 80% of that sale of that business, and I was commissioned with, how do we give this away in the most effective way? How do we do this right? So I cut my teeth on. I was just thrown into the fire. Like, okay, you're the guy. How do we do this the right way? So I got that experience right off the bat. In the same month, I was introduced to an individual who's been a very close friend of mine, who's a leader in effective giving and goes around the country. He's a counselor to the mega pastors around the country, and he also helps many of the ministries you've heard and know about, helps them with their fundraising. So he's helped me with major donor giving as well. Along with, at the very same time, so this is how God just rewarded me and affirmed what I was doing in my life. And I was asked to join our institutional group at the time with Morgan Stanley, and to counsel board members of major universities around the country, like Miami University and Hillsdale College that you've heard of, and many other universities around the Midwest. So that all happened to me. So with all that, I became, within like a month, I had to figure out how to do this. And that was a little over 12 years ago, when I started to really jump into this. So that's kind of where it's one of our bread and butter strategies. This is what a lot of people come to our firm because they know, that we're experts in this area, at least from a financial standpoint. I always partner with attorneys when we do this. So I don't have answers for all the legal work necessarily, but from a financial standpoint, I can tell you how it works on the financial side. And usually we're the ones that propose the ideas and then take them to the attorneys to help figure out from that standpoint. But the Bible, we talk a lot about where's your treasure, and I look at the verse 21 there at the very end, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And then God's ownership, He owns it all, right? He owns everything. So we're just stewards, over this capital. We're just stewards. How are we going to? And that goes into the first session that we talked about. Personal stewardship, and that last step of anybody's been through, the last step is giving. It's creating that legacy and being a good steward, and giving back to the kingdom, and not just your tithes, but really going over and above. And how do we, we're talking about expanding. How do we expand this church? We're starting to bust out of this church. We need some more space. So I like to ask, let's dream for a little bit. What additional funds, how would they impact your church and your ministry? Let's sit back and dream. What would you do with $100,000? $100,000 gift, to the church. Who needs more staff? Pastors? Nobody. So some of you are probably running, the whole show yourself, or, there are very few of you trying to do it. So, maybe you need, a remodel, of your church, or you need a new sanctuary, or, you just need more space, for the children's ministry, parking lots. Never fun, right? Some people have gravel, some, have paved parking lots, but sometimes that can be a source of contention, in the church, but sometimes it needs to be redone. What about a mission trip? It'd be great to send a group of people on a mission trip or help fund it, because those can be expensive. The audio-visual equipment, we all know how expensive that is, right? We've all had to dip into, look at our church budgets and say, how are we going to pay for this? Then you get someone like Zach Carpenter, on your staff. Anybody know Zach? and he's always got some ideas for where we can, what we can do. We in Circleville, we had a great Upward Sports program, a phenomenal program. And, I encourage, if you don't have one locally, you ought to look into that. So, but it takes money to put it on initially. To get it going, it takes a little bit of money, and maybe that's something that you need some extra funds for. So, you were called to change the world, to get out in the community, to spread the gospel, and I think that sometimes finances, a lot of pastors can get uneasy talking about it. This is what I do, so I'm very comfortable talking about finances, talking about giving. But sometimes it can hold you back. So hopefully I'll give you a couple ideas here, a couple things to talk about or to think about today. And I'd like you just to jot down a few things and take it back to your church. So this, the 96%, historically, we've funded all of our ministries and the church from weekly offerings of cash and checks, right? Has anyone seen this statistic from the Nazarene Foundation? Okay, 96% of all the money that comes in is from cash and checks, weekly tithes and offerings. But very few people hold their money in just cash and checks. And, when we talk about fundraising, a capital campaign, or we talk about major gifts, and And I'm not just, we need those tithes and offerings. We need them because they pay for your salary, they keep the lights on. But to really get out and spread the gospel, to do some of these things, that if we want to grow in our communities, you need extra dollars. You do need extra dollars. We all do, right? Every church needs a little bit more. And the way to get after that is to look beyond someone just saying, well, I can only write a $2,000 check. Well, I met with someone last night, and they lost their husband, and they have not given to their church for the last year, just because dealing with the loss of the spouse, and she'd had very little cash, but we had this account that we pulled in from another company, and we were just holding it, and she had like $60,000 in this account in mutual funds. And in a few minutes I'll show you an example, but I gave her this example. I said, why are we just thinking about the cash? Why don't we give these mutual funds away? Why don't we give some of it, to catch you back up, to your tithes, and we can just do it all in one lump sum. And she's like, wow, I never really thought about that. And she had plenty of faith. She wanted to do it. She wanted to be obedient. So it's just something she never thought about. So that's what I would like you to start thinking about, is don't just think about cash and giving. Don't just think about it. So where are our assets? The 91% of our wealth. Everyone, you think about all of your personal situations. Some of you own a house. You own a car, right? You own rental properties, maybe. Most everyone has retirement accounts. Some people have business interest. And if you look in your congregations, this is where you'll hit every one of these. Every one of these. And even I'm going to give you some examples, but even some of the people in your congregation that are in their 80s, 90s, they have a lot of these just laying around, and they don't know what to do with it. They really don't. So most of the wealth is tied up into things that are not cash. And, I would ask you to start thinking beyond the weekly offering plate and start thinking about, trying to attract other dollars. And I also would tell you, I wrote this down. I was just thinking about this. I've been praying about this over time. So many people they don't think that there's any money in their communities or in their church. And I hear that a lot. Like, you think that, our congregation, we're small and we don't have much money. You would be surprised, okay? You would be shocked. There's a good book, The Millionaire Next Door. Anybody heard of that book, The Millionaire Next Door? It's a good book that if you read through it, it's got all kinds of crazy statistics. And I've seen it so many times where you have people sitting in your pews that have $2 million. And you would never know it, because they've drove the same truck for 15 years. They lived in the same house for 40, and they write their $200 tithe check every month. But guess they either did that example where they've been saving for many years and their mutual funds have grown, or they bought a bank stock 40 years ago for $10,000 and now it's worth $2 million. I'm thinking of like our congregation in Circleville. I know an individual who bought a bank stock and held it for 40 years, bought it 40 years ago, and it's grown to a couple $1 million, and no one knows it. No one has a clue. No one has a clue. And I can't say anything. And there's a fine line when you're in the congregation and you're a friend, and you have to be very careful with that. But I know it. And there's a lot of great techniques. We'll talk about how to unlock that and give, try to get some of those dollars, away from them. But it's there. That's my point. There is 11 million millionaires in the United States today. As of 2016, I guess there's probably more now. So there's a lot of millionaires out there. And I think that, Wendell, you remember that report that I put together of all like the charitable money within Pickaway County. It was shocking. we had 50 to $75 million just sitting out there waiting to be given away in these charitable trusts, because there's ways we can look that up, per county. So when we need to think about moving beyond the weekly offering plate, there was $410 billion given last year to charities. Okay, $410 billion. How much are we collecting? Not enough. We're not collecting enough. We talk about there's not, I should have brought my buddy Chuck Wellman with me. He'd love to talk on tithing. But we need to capture more of those funds. They're going somewhere. Okay, they're going somewhere. People over the age of 65 are passing away at a rate of 5,000 per day. It's the baby boomers, right? Everyone's passing away, and you have this generational wealth that in some cases, and we've seen this many times, that mom and dad have been in the church for 50 years, part of the history of the church, and then you've got one child who's also in the church and has a Christian family, living a godly lifestyle, and then one that's not. And in some cases you're seeing this, that their financial plan, they either have not done an estate plan or they haven't done anything, or they're just giving it to both children. So you're passing money along to people that will never give back to the church. This wealth is being passed on to someone who's probably going to buy a big house and Corvette and some things like that once they inherit the money. So did you know 78% of people die without a will? I don't want to ask and poll this room, but I would imagine there are people here, probably half at least, that don't have a will. And some of you do, some of you don't. But the problem with that is, do you want the state telling your family where the money goes? And I think everyone would agree, no. Even if you've got $5,000 to your name, you don't want the state dictating where that money's going to go. So, and there's, in the press, like Aretha Franklin, she died without a will just recently. I don't know if you saw that headline. The other famous person was Prince. He, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, died without a will. That's a mess. The attorneys love it, because they'll be fighting over that for a decade. Generating fees, but yeah, it's really important, and a lot of people, that's just where you start. It was a will. So very, very simple to do it. It could take, take you 30 minutes to do a will. Most people, and I want to give you an example of two people that I've met with. So like in our church, I would just try to help people. And I don't want to take them on as a client, just help them. And most of them were older folks that have given their lives to service and the church. And there was two particular people in their 80s. I sat down with them, and they've got each one of them have 3 or 4 annuities, and then they have an IRA, and then they have an investment account. These are all small, very small. But they might total up to $200,000 total. And, I would sit down with them. I'm like, and I'd ask them, so why don't we just give this account right here to the church, or this one? And they're like, wow, that's a great idea. We can do that? And I'm like, yeah, we can do that. And these are folks that you would think that they would know that. Some of them are former pastors, that have been a Nazarene pastor for 50 plus years and it just never really occurred to them that I could do this, I could give. And it was just very easy to say, why don't we take these 2 accounts, make the beneficiary the church, and then leave the rest to your kids. And just, it's very clean that way, it's very easy. No one's brought it up to them. No one's ever talked to them about it. And so don't just assume that people know. This is an individual that should have known or just hadn't been educated. And there's no doubt that most when I sit down with these people, most people have not, they don't give to the church. They're like, well, I've tithed all my life, and they don't include the church in their estate plan. We're really trying to advocate it, really getting involved with our clients and telling them you got to include your church, in your favorite ministry, in your estate plan. It's not, whether you should or not, you have to. That's where you start. So that's what, I just think that these are things that need to be talked about. I don't know why, but maybe it's because people are uncomfortable talking about finances and money, but they're great discussions for our congregation. So let's look at some of the benefits of an estate plan. First is peace. I cannot tell you what, we actually, we will harass our clients until they get it done. We don't let them go by without having an estate plan, because we have to clean up, and we get referred into situations where there's no estate plan. It's a mess. And when you have it all done, there's a certain peace that comes over a family and a couple when they're done. They're like, oh, now we can enjoy life, and they usually come into our office and they smile, and they're just happy they got something done. It's not fun planning this out. I get it. It's not fun. But it's just something that we have to do. I mean, we spend a lifetime, gathering assets, being great stewards. And then some people are not willing to spend an hour or two to sit down and do their estate plan. Honestly, it's ridiculous. It's being lazy and not taking care of business. So you have to do it. You have to. That's part of, our calling to be good stewards over this capital. That's the final piece. So the next thing we talk about, protection, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but there are certain things when you do your estate plan, if you do meet with a good attorney that handles this, they're going to have you put the medical directives in there, the financial power of attorney to take care of some of those things. It's like a package. Most good attorneys will put a package together for you. Taxes are not an issue anymore because of the new tax laws. There's rarely have estate tax issues unless your estate is more than $10 million as a family. It probably doesn't affect too many people in here. So probate, if you do pass away without a will and your estate plan, it's a trust, probate expenses can be pretty hefty. If anybody's dealt with this, this is a kind of a nice place where attorneys can get a big fat catcher's mitt out there and just collect those fees as they come in. And it's easy work, but they can legally charge a lot of fees with probating an estate. And protecting your wishes. You might have a child that's living a wild lifestyle that you just want to make sure that, they would not be in good shape if they inherited some money. They would use it for the wrong purposes. So that might be a wish that you want to protect, and you want to protect them and that child. So those are some benefits of putting an estate plan together. Finally, I think it's really cool to say your final act here on earth. I always think about how cool it will be, when people are settling up my estate and there's some huge chunks of change that are going to different ministries and churches and just blessing them. And I just, I smile when I think about that, when that day comes. So be a blessing. So what should we do? Obviously, do your will first. That's easy, as you could pull that off online. You can find a will to fill out. Transfer on deaths are very easy as well to do at any bank account, any financial institution. It's at Fidelity, it's like one form. You just fill it out, and you don't have to name a person. You can name your church. As transfer on death, when I pass away, this account goes to the church. Living trust is another step once you start to accumulate some assets. Living trusts are great because they avoid probate altogether. Some people like living trusts because probate court is public record. You can go look at what people are worth when they pass away if they don't have a living trust in order. So everything will bypass probate court. If you have all your money in living trusts, and you can change it as much as you want. You can change your beneficiaries around in that as well. Durable power of attorney for finances and the healthcare directives. I gave you the story about my father. He didn't have these things. And I got called onto the carpet, and I had to make decisions. We had a conversation years before, and I knew my dad well to understand how he wanted to live and what state he would not want to live in. I had to pull the plug, with my father. But we had those conversations. You can spell it right out in those healthcare directives. And that's nice. When you have you have multiple kids in your family, very nice to have it spelled out exactly, because you don't want one child alienated because they thought, well, I thought Dad said this. I think Dad could have fought another week. Maybe he could have turned the corner. Well, put it in writing, save your family. Beneficiary review. This beneficiary review is the easiest thing you can do, and that was the example I gave you when I met with those families. It's simply just taking beneficiary forms, usually a one-pager, and just making the church the beneficiary of that account. Every IRA, annuity, insurance has them. No one has to know about it. No one. So if you have a family and you made the church the beneficiary, the kids don't get notified that, hey, did you know that Mom gave away $25,000, to the church? They don't even know. It just goes to the church. Okay. And there's no disputes over that whatsoever. And it's very clean and easy. Part of the tax saving strategies that I talk about, just very easy to think about, is if you've got $100,000 in an IRA or an annuity, either one, and then you've got $100,000 in, let's just say, cash. And then this couple says, we want to give half our money to the church. Okay? Always pick the IRA or the annuity, because you name them as the beneficiary. And you think about it, if you're inheriting something as a child, you want to get the cash. You want the cash. Because if you inherit an IRA, when you take that money out, it's taxable to you at your tax rate. Okay? So really, the IRA that has $100,000 in it, let's just make things simple and say it's worth 70 cents on the dollar. Okay? That's what you messed up. If you didn't dictate this the right way and you didn't spell it out, as a family, you messed up because you gave your kid, something that's 70 cents on the dollar, and they're going to have to put on their tax return, when they take money out. Maybe more if tax rates go up. As opposed to if the church gets that IRA or annuity, they're not taxed on it. They don't pay tax. They just receive the money. The church, we'll take whatever. Send us whatever, right? So that's the best way to do it. And it's very easy. It's just sitting down and explaining the concept and then filling out the beneficiary form. But before they work with us, I would say 90% of our clients have never thought that through. So our congregations, 90+% have never thought that through. I have a will and estate planner now that's an older one from the Nazarene Foundation. If you fill this thing out and you take it to an estate planning attorney, you can get everything done. Even if you're an older couple and you've got some assets, it consolidates everything. It gets you thinking about every possible thing you can think about. If you do have younger children, you think about things like custodians for your younger children if something happens to you and your wife. So it gets you thinking about everything, but it's a PDF. I have my cards up here. If anybody wants it, either ask Wendell or email me and I'll send it to you. The Nazarene Foundation now has changed things, and they want you to go online and fill everything out online, and then they have the same concept, but you're going to put all your information in, and they'll probably want to call you and talk to you about giving a piece to them too. So, but that's their way to probably pay their salaries for the foundation and everything. So if you want it, let me know, okay? Cost of putting an estate plan together ranges. You go to really, really good estate planning attorneys like in downtown Columbus and you'll pay $3,500 for a good one, all the way to like $1,000 for maybe someone who's local in a rural area. It just depends kind of on where they're at. But I definitely, if you're going to do estate planning, go to someone that does estate planning. Don't just go to an attorney who does family law, or does everything. There's a lot of attorneys that just do estate planning. So how to effectively give, what do we need to be doing? Obviously, you can bequest it, name in your will or trust, name the church right there. Very easy to do. Beneficiary designations, transfer on deaths, they work the same way. Again, very easy, one form to fill these out. Charitable trusts are advanced tax planning strategies. I would never get into a conversation about these with either someone in your congregation or other experts, because they're very complicated. But I think I'd also be very careful, because they really should be implemented for people that have net worths of maybe $2 million or more. If that makes sense, okay? So they're very few, and that you need to work with someone like myself or someone who does a lot of them and understands them well. We recently received a new client that he has $1 million charitable remainder annuity trust, and but he only has like $500,000 to $600,000 in his outside of that. That's all he has. So I mean, he got sold the concept and was not saying you can't never outgive God, but he's in a tricky situation where he might have all this money going to a specific charity and not enough money to live on, at some point. So, because he sat through a sales presentation and was sold. So you have to be careful with those. Donor advised funds they're awesome. I absolutely love donor advised funds. Our firm, about a third of our clients now have them, and that's growing. We're opening up new donor advised funds every month. We'll probably, just about every client of ours will probably have a donor advised fund by the end of maybe next year. And they're your smaller version of a private foundation. So we'll talk a little bit more about those here in a minute. So what kind of things can we give? And I put all this on here just to tell you, you can give anything. Okay, anything possible. That the 91% of wealth, the church will take whatever, and if the church won't take it, a lot of times the church won't, let's use some of the vehicles that I've mentioned, charitable trusts or donor advised funds, to implement some of these strategies. So one quick example that I'm going to go through, and this is using a donor advised fund. I updated these numbers from 2013, but Timothy bought 100 shares of John Deere back in 2008 at $30 a share. That is true. You could buy John Deere for $30 a share in 2008. Just about a week ago, it was $145 a share, almost $150 today. But $145 a share, it's appreciated that much. And Timothy wants to give, let's just say, for this example's purposes, they want to give $14,500 to the church. If he sells the stock and gives it to the church, he'll owe federal capital gains tax. At the lowest level would be 15%. So the 15% is only on the gain, but you can see the math there. He'll owe a little over $1,700 in tax. If this person is a little bit more well off and has a higher income, actually the tax rate is going to be like 23.8% instead of 15. But I just used 15 to make it simple. But here's the catch. If you give the stock to the church through a donor advised fund, he'll owe no capital gains tax on this transaction. he'll be able to donate the full amount to the donor advised fund. You get credit for the charitable donation in the full amount. And who loves to save money on taxes? I mean, don't we all? I mean, don't we all get a kick out of, hey, I just saved $1,700. So, and the church doesn't mind. The church will get a check from the donor advised fund in the amount that was given. So nobody pays tax here. What a phenomenal vehicle. Very easy to implement. Very easy to set up. And this is a small example. We've used these. We've probably funneled $25 million through these in the last 10 years. Just in our firm, just understanding this, and just mainly through stocks like this. So it's a great vehicle for transferring wealth, to our church. So you can give these donor advised funds, you can give appreciated securities, which, I just mentioned. You can give real estate. We're going through an example now where there's a second home. A client of ours has a second home that they have a very low cost basis in. They bought it 30 years ago for, minimal, probably 20% of what it's worth today. And we're going to donate that. So Fidelity Charitable, the company that we work with, they have teams of attorneys that will help facilitate the gift to this donor advised vehicle. And then, he's got 3 different ministries that he wants to bless through that, through that vehicle. So he's going to get the fair market value, what this home is worth, and not have to pay any tax on donating that. Possessions, grain is a great example. If you have farmers, there's certain, it gets complicated, but there's certain things on a farm that we can give, okay, to these donor advised vehicles. Even insurance and annuities, and then another really neat concept is your does anybody know the required minimum distribution law? Okay, so if you, when you're over 70 and a half, you have to give money from your IRAs. You have to do that. You have to take money out of your IRAs if you own an IRA. And a lot of people are worried about that, and it bugs them. And the reason why is the IRS wants that taxable income. They want to take taxes out on that income and have you take it out. The law was put into place years ago because like the Vanderbilt and Rockefeller families were accumulating all the assets and never taking money out of their IRAs. So the IRS mandates you take it out over time. You can give these required minimum distributions directly to the church, okay, as a qualified charitable distribution. The really cool thing is if you can do that up to $100,000 per spouse, and that money is not taxable. It does not show up on your 1040. It's not taxable at all. You don't get a tax deduction, but you don't pay the tax on it. So we have clients that are saying, okay, that's perfect. From now on, I'm just going to give this amount to our church. And it could be substantial, but it doesn't matter what the amount is. It's a great little strategy. It's very easy to implement. You just have to know about it. So that's a great little campaign or an announcement that you can make with a senior group, or if you have a congregation and if it's a smaller congregation and you have 10 people that are over 70, send out a letter, Yeah,
I would add to all that, especially when they're taking Social Security, they begin to get taxed and pay back on Social Security after a certain dollar amount. So it is to their advantage to do that, as well as Part B, their insurance rates go up, depending on how much it makes. So add that to the mix, and it's well beyond the tax savings.
Yes, yeah. Even at lower tax brackets, it probably makes more sense. As you make more money, the more of your Social Security is taxed.
That distribution, it can be set up. It can be set up on a monthly basis, yearly basis. How does that work?
We do most of ours at the very end of the year because it grows all year tax-free, and then we take the distribution before December 31st. You can set it up however you want. You have to fill out a special form every time you do it because it is a little different. But But the key is the individual has to be over 70 and a half that's giving it, okay? Yeah, and if you have questions, you can reach out to me anytime with that. I'll show you how we do it and make it easy for you. So this was a slide from my previous presentation, and I just wrote down some notes. I don't want to go into too much of the charitable gift. I will say this about charitable gift annuities. We haven't talked about those. Ministries, foundations like the Nazarene Foundation, they offer those, and that's where you put money into them, and then you get an income stream for life. Okay, once you give the foundation like $10,000, and then they will give you a check for $500 for the rest of your life. Okay, that's how they work. Okay, we don't have any clients that do those. They would rather control their giving a little bit more than that, and they're not looking for an income from it necessarily. So I can just tell you, through our experience, I don't think they're great vehicles to accomplish what you want generally. I think you can do a lot of things through all these other vehicles that we talked about, and donor advised funds are probably the best vehicles to use. The expenses on these are almost nothing. It's amazing how like Fidelity Charitable makes any money, but they've literally got hundreds of billions of dollars in these donor advised funds to give away. Another really cool thing with donor advised funds, and we've used this quite a bit, is done anonymous gifting. So you have a great relationship with someone, and we all live in smaller communities where, it just, you don't want to be known as the guy that gave, because what's that mean? What else do you have? And why didn't you give that money before? All kinds of questions. So there are anonymous, you can give the money to your donor advised fund, and the check can be cut and sent to the church anonymously. They just get a check from Fidelity, and all your IRS papers are done above board for tax work, but it just keeps your identity secret, which is really the people that we know that do it. They're Christians, and they just get a kick out of it. Just blessing their church and blessing, ministries without nobody knowing except us, and their immediate family. So it's a real kick to get that. A lot of joy. So, but I would tell you that, I gave you some of the statistics on millionaires in your congregations. Everybody probably lives by that 80-20 rule within tithes, and I don't know how many people look at it and see it, but the Pareto rule of 80-20, it's alive and well, even in our churches and tithing and major donor giving. Major donor, a lot of these major, you look at through the capital campaigns that I've been a part of, and there's a select few that really carry the thing through and that give 80% of the money. So I think it's really, and I'm not discounting the other, the 20% that's carrying everyone through, but I'm not discounting the 80%. We need them. It's not like we don't need the tithes and offerings every week to keep everything going, keep the lights on. But to really grow, you really need to go after some of these major donors with some of these vehicles to grow your church, to grow your local ministry. And I would, one thing that I learned in a John Maxwell presentation that he gave, this was really telling, and I've kind of lived it out. And it is, he was talking about business owners and entrepreneurs and how to approach. Most business owners can be, well, not most, some of them could be pretty successful. Everyone can probably think of one or two in their congregation that have done pretty well, and they own a business, right? And they have the ability to pour it on, turn the spigot, and really impact your church if they really want to. And what he said was, if you've got a business owner who's doing really well, John Maxwell said, the worst thing you can do is try to rope him into the church and have him serve all over the place. And that would probably be the way he's made up. He wants to help and he wants to get involved in the church and help, but let him use his God-given gifts to make money. Let him keep doing that, and then counsel him on how to effectively minister through his business to his employees and to make a difference in his business. But let him make as much money as possible to help us on the other side, and keep him in the loop. But help, just let him do his thing instead of disrupting his business by pulling him into the church. And John Maxwell said, I've seen so many situations where this business owner has been pulled in and he's taken so much time away from his business that he hasn't effectively made good money, and he's already busy, and it's just stressed him out, stretched him too thin. And I think that personally, I've kind of lived through some of that a little bit, and I think it's a good lesson to learn and to identify early, and it doesn't impact your passion for wanting. As I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I think that, when you meet with some of these business owners and some of these high net worth individuals, I think the way you need to start approaching them and thinking about it is we look at it as an investment. I want to see something that's bigger than these four walls, and I want to see how can I impact not just, buying new chairs, for the sanctuary, but how are we going to pull in, how are we going to double in size? How are we going to spread the gospel, here locally? How are we going to, that's what, as an entrepreneur, that's how they think. How do we really